What impressed me about Sneako's argument wasn't that he defended Islam. It was that he questioned the method. His point was simple. How do we criticize ideas, governments and extremist movements without turning millions of people into one political category?
That was his strongest point. Alex has spent years criticizing the left for replacing evidence with labels. Racist, fascist, colonialist, privileged. His message has always been, judge people by what they do, not by the group they belong to. Sneko simply asked, why shouldn't Muslims receive that same standard?
Exactly. If someone says, conservatives are racist, we ask, which conservatives? What did they actually do? So if someone says, Islam wants this, we should ask the same questions. Which government? Which organization? Which interpretation? Which individual? That's
Because a
consistency.
religion is not automatically a government. It's not an army. It's not a political movement. Once those distinctions disappear, analysis disappears with them.
That's where broad labels become dangerous. The actions of a minority become an explanation for an entire population. That's not evidence. That's generalization.
Serious analysis separates individuals from institutions. Governments make policy. Extremist organizations commit violence. Ordinary believers are not automatically responsible for either. Without those distinctions, politics becomes identity.
And that's why Sneko compared it to identity politics. The left sometimes says, white people are, men are, conservatives are. The right can make exactly the same mistake by saying, Muslims are, different target, same thinking.
As someone associated with the left, I think that's a fair criticism. We've seen how loose labels can shut down debate instead of improving it. The answer isn't replacing one stereotype with another. It's applying the same standard to everyone.
That also applies to responsibility. We wouldn't say modern Christians are responsible for every historical war, or that every American is personally responsible for every foreign policy decision. Responsibility belongs to those who commit the action, not everyone who shares an identity. The same goes for history. Too many debates become historical scoreboards. Conquest, colonialism, empire. Everyone starts counting each other's crimes. Nobody discusses today's problems.
History should help explain the present. It shouldn't become inherited guilt. The better questions are, who holds power today? Which institutions make decisions? Which policies create today's outcomes?
That was Sneko's central point. Judge individuals by their actions. Judge governments by their policies. Judge ideas by evidence. The moment we replace evidence with labels, we're using the same method we claim to oppose.
What frustrated me wasn't that Alex talked about terrorism. Terrorism is real. Extremism is real. The problem was that every road led back to the same examples. Jihad, terror attacks, violent crime, migration. Each example reinforced the last until the audience stopped asking, what caused this? And started asking, who are these people? That's where the conversation stopped moving forward.
Exactly. Those examples are emotionally powerful. But after a while, they stopped building an argument. They simply reinforced what Alex's audience already believed. A serious debate shouldn't just identify problems. It should ask what actually solves them.
That's something journalists learn very quickly. The most shocking stories are often the most memorable. But memorable isn't always representative. Good analysis asks, how common is this? What's driving it? Which institutions failed? Does the evidence support the broader conclusion?
And that's where Sneko kept trying to steer the discussion. Not away from terrorism, towards the response. What did the war on terror achieve? Did Iraq become more stable? Did Afghanistan? Did expanding surveillance protect freedom or slowly erode it? Those are policy questions. They're the conversations we should be having.
Exactly. You can condemn terrorism and still ask whether governments responded effectively. Policies should be judged by results, not simply by good intentions.
And if we genuinely want less extremism, we have to understand why extremist groups emerge. War, state collapse, foreign intervention, economic instability. Understanding causes isn't the same as justifying violence. It's how you prevent it happening again.
At the same time, understanding isn't an excuse. Individuals still choose violence. Communities still have a responsibility to confront extremism within their own ranks. You need accountability as well as explanation.
Another issue that disappeared was civil liberties. Security matters. But history shows that fear often leads governments to expand surveillance, reduce privacy, and increase state power. The challenge is protecting both security and freedom. Security
The
and
same
freedom.
applies to migration. People argue constantly about borders. Far fewer ask why millions leave their homes. Wars, failed states, economic collapse, regional instability. If you ignore those causes, you'll keep debating the symptoms while the disease continues.
That's what I think the debate ultimately missed. Sneeko kept trying to move the discussion from identities to institutions, from outrage to policy, from blame to solutions. Those conversations are harder, but they're also the ones that matter most.
This is where the consequences become real. The language we use shapes how neighbors see one another. And that has consequences far beyond a
The
debate.
problem wasn't that Alex spoke about terrorism. The problem was that every example pointed to the same conclusion. Jihad, extremism, crime, migration. Eventually, the audience stops asking, "What caused this?" and starts asking, "Who are these people?" That's when identity replaces analysis.
We can't ignore real problems. Extremism exists. Integration challenges exist. People deserve honest conversations about them. But honesty also means making distinctions. A terrorist is not an entire religion. A criminal is not an entire community.
And while people argue over identities, the people with real power often disappear from the conversation. Governments, military alliances, lobbying, economic interests, those institutions shape events far more than ordinary families do.
That's why I found the debate frustrating. Sneeko kept trying to move beyond identity and towards policy. Who started the wars? Who benefits from them? Who pays for them? What actually makes societies safer? Those questions never really got answered.
And that's important because wars don't end when the fighting stops. They reshape entire societies. They create refugees. They destroy economies. They change demographics. Migration is often treated as the problem. But very often it's the consequence of deeper political decisions.
The tragedy is that ordinary Muslims and Christians often end up blaming one another, while suffering many of the same consequences. Both communities lose loved ones in war. Both want safe neighborhoods. Both want stable families. Both want opportunities for their children. Yet political narratives push them towards suspicion instead of cooperation.
That's what Alex missed. You can recognize genuine threats without treating an entire population as the threat. And cooperation doesn't require pretending everything is fine. It requires enough trust to discuss difficult issues honestly without falling into collective blame.
Modern politics rewards simple enemies. Real solutions are almost always more complicated.
Fear builds audiences. It rarely builds good policy.
The real question isn't, are Muslims or Christians the problem? It's, what political decisions create instability and which ones actually reduce it.
Maybe that's the lesson. The hardest conversations are not about finding someone to blame. They're about understanding the forces that shape all of us and refusing to let fear turn neighbors into enemies.
For Muslims, Christians, Jews, and those with no religious faith who recognize that our political system is in crisis and that democracy and civil liberties are under sustained pressure, there is a question we can no longer avoid. How do we engage with a politics built on fantasy rather than fact? How do you reason with someone who insists the Quran is nothing more than a battle manual, that Islam is a blueprint for conquest, that Sharia law is about to replace parliament, that Muslim immigrants are an invading army, that Muslim women are little more than slaves, or who recycles grotesque myths about Muslims murdering Babis to justify their fear? These are not serious arguments. They are slogans stitched together from conspiracy theories, moral panic, and decades of propaganda. Repeated often enough, they begin to masquerade as common sense. Democracy cannot survive when public debate is held hostage by fiction, fear, and manufactured outrage.